This is a paid message from GoFundMe. Meet Juan Naula. When his son was hospitalized for a viral infection, Juan started a GoFundMe to pay for medical expenses.
It was $5,000 to pay the bill for my son, and I need only 22 hours. It was amazing. People really trust on GoFundMe.
How did Juan raise $5,000 in less than a day? He posted a short video on GoFundMe telling his story in 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Be specific, be quick, and tell what are you going to be using the funds for. I was nervous to do it because it doesn't feel okay to ask money, but you shouldn't be nervous. Sometimes you just have to do it and see the results. We were able to save my son's life. Thanks to GoFundMe that we still have my son with us.
Start your GoFundMe today at GoFundMe.com. That's GoFundMe.com. GoFundMe.com. This message reflects one person's experience.
A science story, huh?
These NYU scientists,
I felt
really
right.
I was so
And I just thought, well,
I had figured it out.
it was that golden moment.
Because science was on my side.
Hey everyone, and welcome to The Story Clutter, where we bring you true personal stories about science that reveal just how strange, complicated, and deeply human this world really is. I'm your host, Misha Gajewski, and today's episode is about fertility and the ups and downs that go along with the journey of trying to conceive. Our first story comes from educator, activist, writer, and storyteller Annie Tan. She shared the story at our go-to spot in New York, Caveat, in January earlier this year. Before we dive in, I do want to let you know that this story does mention pregnancy loss and miscarriage. Okay, here's Annie.
So my story takes place on a Saturday night in May. It's dark, it's cloudy, it's starting to rain, and my husband and I are getting our laundry. We have to go to the laundromat, pick up our stuff, and we're wheeling our cart back. And all of a sudden, Corey swerves the cart, and he says, "Annie, there's a piece of poop there." And I was like, okay. We swerved, and then out of the corner of my eye, the poop started to move. And I was like, oh. So we looked closer, we shined a flashlight, and it turned out to be a little bird. And as a New Yorker, I normally would just walk away from the bird. I have definitely walked away from many a dead bird in my lifetime and been like, too bad, bye, and walked away. But this Saturday night, I just couldn't leave this bird alone. And what I didn't tell you about this May Saturday was that it was 5 days after I had just had a pregnancy loss. So I had something called preterm premature rupture of membrane, PPROM, which means basically your water breaks too early. And that happened at 17 weeks, about 4 months pregnant. And my daughter Chloe and me still had a heartbeat. And so we were hoping like maybe my mucus plug would like stay in. But the next day I started developing an infection. And if I didn't get an induced abortion or what's called a DNE, where they vacuum out the remains of your child, then I could have also died too from that infection. And so that happened, and I was just so sad, carrying around grief napkins with me everywhere, crying everywhere I went. And I used one of those grief napkins to pick up this little bird and put it next to a tree so that at least the bird wouldn't get stepped on. And I looked at Corey and I was like, Corey, put the laundry away, get a shoebox, get something. We've got to figure out what to do with the bird. And Corey's like, but what if it has bird flu? What if it has disease? Corey, no. So I pick up my phone and I'm like, all right, let's look up what to do. New York City injured bird on Google. What to do? And we find something from the New York City Bird Alliance. And they say to get a paper bag, a tote bag, or a shoebox, and put the bird inside. And that way it won't get disoriented, close it up, and then bring it home. And I looked at Corey and I looked at this bird. And I just remembered the day that I left the hospital without Chloe. That was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do in my life. And I said, we can't leave this bird. So Corey goes upstairs. He grabs many gloves because we have so many gloves from COVID. And we pick up the bird and we put it in the shoebox and we bring it upstairs. And while he's getting the stuff, I am emailing because the New York City Bird Alliance has an email to send the location and the photo to. And so we just wait and we see what to do. But as I'm looking at this bird, it looks so curmudgeonly. It looks so grumpy. It's so cute. It fits in the palm of my hand. And it looks like it has a gash on its head. Its feathers are just like, there's no feathers on its head. And it just looks so pathetic. And I was like, what do we do? And less than half an hour later, we get a phone call from a volunteer who was just about to close up for the night. And so she was like, okay, you need to first make a nest. Do you have any hand warmers? Because your bird, you said, is shaking. So we got hand warmers, and then you wrap them in tissues so that the bird doesn't burn, because the hand warmers can get really, really hot. And then the person told us to make like a container. So we put it in a plastic container, and I put a lot of paper tissues in there. And then the person was like, okay, do you have like towels to make it soft, like a softness? And I was like, I am not going to let a little bird shit all over a good towel. And so more paper tissues in there. And the volunteer said just from the photo, she could tell this was a nestling mockingbird. So this mockingbird could not have flown. It could not have survived on its own without us. So she really thanked us. And then she said, can you bring the bird into our office headquarters tomorrow? And I was like, that is a step too far. I am not going to do that. Not because I'm not a kind person, but that day, that Sunday was the second Sunday of May. And what is the second Sunday of May? Mother's Day. After 6 days after I lost Chloe, to then think about Mother's Day, I knew I had no plans for that day except to be under cover and cry under my blankets. And I knew I couldn't bring that bird. I didn't even know if I could bring that bird. So I just meekly said, can someone come to pick up the bird? And so the person says, yes, we can get someone on our transporter team to pick up the bird. So we wait, and we wait for the volunteer to let us know what's happening. While that's happening, we see the bird starting to get comfortable in its nest, still really quiet. And Corey looks at me and he just says, wow, it's like we're Jonathan and Martha Kent bringing home a wayward child. And then out of nowhere, all of a sudden we hear, meh, 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 meh. So this bird has started chirping because it's now like feeling okay. It's looking at us like weird. And we are also not allowed to feed the bird or give it water in case of any injuries. Maybe it'll choke. So we just kind of look at it. And then an hour later, we get a call from another volunteer saying she'll be there at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. And she said, please let us know if the bird survives the night, because obviously if the bird does not survive the night, there's no reason for me to come. And so we, hang up and I look at the bird. The hardest thing of that night was closing the shoebox to this bird. It just felt so miserable to hide it and just wonder, is this bird gonna be alive when I open this box tomorrow? Please, bird, please survive, is what I said to the box. I closed the lights. I tried to pretend there wasn't another life in the room. and we just hoped. I went to bed somehow, set my alarm to meet the volunteer at 11, and then I woke up without an alarm because I was like, oh my God, like, is this bird still alive? And I could hear very, very faintly from my pillow, meh, 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 meh. So I like hop out of bed, no slippers on, and I just run to the shoebox and I open up the shoebox. The bird has jumped out of his nest, shat all over the shoebox with the tissues, and was now angry at me. Meh, 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 meh. Wanting water, wanting food. And I was like, is this how a parent feels when they can't help their child? This is horrible. This is the worst feeling in the world. But I was so happy to text that volunteer and say, the bird is alive. And as I looked at my phone, I also got a bunch of text messages from friends who knew about Chloe and who said, Happy Mother's Day, Annie, to you and Chloe. And that just made me feel so seen that Mother's Day, that they would acknowledge me as a mom. The volunteer came at 11, and she told me that she was supposed to do 3 bird pickups today, but the other 2 birds didn't survive, and mine was the only pickup today. We tried to reunite the bird with her family, but the nest was on the 3rd floor, so there was no way. So she, in her owl-covered bag, brought the bird into the headquarters. And I looked at Corey, and I was like, we saved a motherfucking bird on Mother's Day. Yeah. 2.5 weeks after that, the funeral home called and told us that Chloe's ashes were ready. And so I went to pick up the ashes. And as I was walking home from the car with the ashes, I got an email from the Wild Bird Fund. And they said, we're doing everything we can for the bird you brought in. Thank you. We have named her Linny. We don't have capacity to give you any more updates, but rest assured, we're going to do everything we can. And so I am relieved knowing the day we bring Chloe home is the day that Linny the bird's okay. A year passes, and I take care of myself. I take a mental health day, and then 5 more days passes, and then I'm just spiraling again. It's been one of the hardest years of my life, just wondering if we'll get pregnant. We're not pregnant yet. We're grieving still. And not only are we grieving the loss of Chloe, but we're grieving a chance at possibly ever having a biological child. And so I start doom scrolling, as one does, and Google Photos reminds me, hey, it's the year anniversary of this bird. And so I was like, oh, right, Linny. So I was like, let me scroll through the Wild Bird Fund's Instagram page, which has all of these cute birds that have been rescued. Highly recommend. And I just keep scrolling. I keep looking. And then I look at a post from May 30th, 2024, just 19 days after we found Linny. And the caption says they found a bunch of birds, a robin, but also some nestling mockingbirds. And I swipe to the second photo, and there's a little curmudgeonly mockingbird that's bigger and has a green band on it. And I'm like, I think that's Linny. So I DM the Wild Bird Fund Instagram, and I was like, hey, do you think this bird is Linny? And 40 minutes later, this is 10 p.m., and they responded at 10:45 p.m. on a Friday or Saturday night. And they said, yes, I think that is Linny. She had a green band. She was in our care for a month, and afterwards we took her to the Narrows Botanical Garden in Bay Ridge. And when she was ready and gotten used to the wild, we set her free alongside a number of nursery birds. And that just warmed my heart. Even through this really, really hard infertility journey, I am doing my 3rd egg retrieval sometime this week for IVF. We've done IUI. We've done the ovulation medications. We've cried so much. We've done insurance changes, which has been horrible. And every time I think about, man, this just sucks. What was Chloe's death for? Why am I just doing all this to myself? And then one day on a really, really hard day, I was by my window and I heard, meh, 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 meh. Some adult mockingbird out somewhere in the distance. And I knew it. And it just reminded me that there's some bird out there, Linny the bird, flying wild, flying free right now because Chloe existed. Thank you.
That was Annie. And if you'd like to see pictures of Linny or learn more about Annie, you can head to our website, storycollider.org. Being a storyteller is one great way to make the Story Collider happen, but it's far from the only one. Not everyone wants to be in the spotlight, and that's okay. Support behind the scenes helps ensure we can keep sharing stories like this. Now, more than ever, we need to amplify the voices of scientists and science communicators whose stories might otherwise go unheard. At Story Collider, we believe that true, personal stories can cut through the noise, bringing science to life, building trust, and helping people connect on a deeply human level. Our donors make that possible. They help us produce this podcast, share powerful stories, and keep the conversation going. If you believe in the power of science storytelling, please consider making a donation at storycollider.org/donate. Most people give around $10 a month, and every tax-deductible contribution, big or small, helps us ensure that science has a voice. Thank you for helping us share these stories. Okay, so as someone currently deep in the nesting phase of pregnancy, I have become obsessed with making sure everything in the house is ready for a baby. Because every parent I know keeps warning me that once the baby arrives, your brain basically turns into a web browser with 47 tabs open at all times. So, getting the Whisker Litter Robot 4 has already made me feel a little more prepared for the chaos ahead. We set it up recently, and the biggest thing for me and my partner is just not having to think about the litter box nearly as much. The litter robot automatically cycles after every use, and there's dramatically less scooping and cleanup involved. I genuinely think this is going to make a huge difference once we're sleep deprived and juggling newborn life, because the less daily maintenance and cleanup we have to deal with, the better. And the Whisker app has been surprisingly helpful too. You can check things like usage stats, litter levels, and your cat's weight right from your phone. Whisker also has different litter robot models depending on your household size, plus starter bundles that help you get fully set up while saving some money. Maintain your cat's litter while focusing on your growing family. Learn more about Whisker litter robot models and starter kits today to get set up before your new baby arrives. Take an additional $50 off bundles with code COLLIDER when you shop at whisker.com/collider. That's an additional $50 off bundles with code COLLIDER at whisker.com/collider. Check out our new podcast called The Persistence Lab, a show from AbbVie that tells the stories of the patients, scientists, and clinicians who are committed to driving real change in medicine and healthcare, and the resilience that pushes them forward. These aren't headlines. They're deeply human moments that show how progress happens, one step at a time. You can find The Persistence Lab now on your favorite podcast platform. Our next story is from Kibby McMahon. She's a clinical psychologist, researcher, and digital health entrepreneur. Her story was also recorded at the same show at Caveat in New York in January 2026. Here's Kibby.
So, I used to be a big believer in willpower. I used to plan. I used to work hard and believe that if you just put in the effort and plan and work, you could get everything you want in life. And I earned my way into my PhD program at Duke, where I was studying to be a clinical psychologist, and I was like the best student. I was glued to my computer for 12 hours a day, every day. It's not an exaggeration. And I was just doing all the right things. But then when I turned 30, my biological clock started to tick. And I was like, okay, it's time for family. I had spent all of my energies building my career up at that point, but then I was like, okay, I'm going to do family now. So everything seemed like it was going to plan when my college boyfriend came back into my life. I hadn't seen him for many years, and we ran into each other at a mutual friend's wedding. And he actually admitted to me that I was the only woman he's ever loved. Cool. And he had commitment issues back then, so I was like, I'm not going to entertain this unless you're serious. And he said everything I wanted to hear. He was like, I want to get married and have babies with you. I'll move to be with you. And he was training to be a pediatrician. Cha-ching. It seemed like everything was just working out. Everything was good on paper. But I always had this gut feeling that something wasn't right. I always had it, even from the very beginning. And when he moved into my house, he decided that he needed to take a brief sabbatical to find himself for about 2 to 3 months. That lasted about 4 years. And apparently he was so burnt out from his medical training that he needed to heal and recover by sitting in my basement, playing guitar, and smoking weed. As a clinical psychologist, I don't know if that's the right way, but, hey, to each their own. But I was like, okay, fine, this is just a bump in the road. This is hard time. Building a family takes work. So I paid the bills. I took care of the house, 3 meals a day. And I was also writing my master's thesis. So I was really overwhelmed. And I would ask him, like, hey, what are you going to do with your life? Like, are you going to get a job? And it just never went well. It was just an unproductive fight after fight. So I just learned to just not say anything. And I was just hopeful that this was just a rough patch, because this had to work out, right? I needed this to work out. I had to will this family into existence. So we got married in 2018. Great idea. But I was like, okay, marriages aren't perfect, but kids will fix everything, right? So, as you can tell, it didn't really work out that well. I was so shocked when we couldn't get pregnant right away. We tried right away to start to get pregnant, and it just wasn't working. A couple months of trying, and I started to get really anxious. And like the good student, I applied my type A personality to reproduction. And I went down all these rabbit holes on the internet and fertility research about what, leads to fertility or not. And I'm pretty shocked. The fertility research leaves much to be desired. I'm sorry if anyone is in that field, but, do better. Because there is actually a lot that we don't know about why someone can get pregnant. There's a lot of mystery involved. But what we do know is that is usually the woman's fault. So reading all that research, I was like, okay, I'll do what I can. I was taking all the right supplements. I was cutting back on sugar, even though I love sugar. I was meticulously scheduling sex and taking my temperature every day, all the right things, straight A student to reproduction. And the one thing I could find that men could actually do is monitor their marijuana intake. So marijuana was the only thing that science said affect men's fertility. So I was like, hey, I'm going to call him Danny. I was like, Danny, please just abstain from smoking just for a couple weeks before we try, And I remember being in my kitchen, and I had a really rough week. I had just gone on some new meds to try to get me to ovulate, and it was making me a crazy person. And I was just holding myself together. Every day was hard. And Danny was hanging out with a friend in the basement for a couple hours. And then when he came up out of the basement and opened the door, I looked at him, and the first thing I saw was his eyes were bloodshot. And then a moment later, the smell of smoke hit me. And I burst into tears right in front of him. Immediately, he was apologizing. Oh my God, I'm so sorry, I forgot. And I actually thought that made it worse, because I was like, I have been putting my body and mind through hell every single day for months, and you get the luxury of letting it slip your mind? I was heartbroken, but I was also so exhausted. I wanted an equal partner to carry this burden with me, and I was alone carrying it. So I was just so lost. I went to the best fertility doctor I could find at Duke, and I was so excited to put my hands in the best that academia had to offer. I was like, okay, this is going to work. And it made me feel so much worse. I was alone in my first appointment with him, this doctor, famous doctor, and he was just rattling off depressing statistics about pregnancy, and then even more depressing prices of the treatments that would help me. And I sat there silently, and I looked at him, I said, like, what's wrong with me? Is there something wrong with me? Can I ever have children? And he looked me dead in the eye and said, I think there's a 0% chance that you'll get pregnant naturally. And I remember having to hold in my tears, nod and hold in my tears until I got to my car. And then I just sobbed driving home. And then I called my best friend, Alex, who we've been best friends since we were 18. And even though we've always lived on opposite sides of the country, he was always the person that I called whenever I was upset or just wanted to vent. And same here. He always called me. We were each other's like confidants at home. And I told him what happened, and he was just like, you know what? I know you're going to be a mother. I have faith. I have faith. And I just wanted to have the same faith that he did. But I wasn't sure. I didn't know. A couple months later, we were starting our IVF cycle, and Danny and I decided to have one last hurrah, a mushroom trip. I'm sorry, Mom. My mom's... It's illegal in some places, you know. And I was like, straight A student, like type A to drugs as well. And I was like, okay, this is when I'm going to remove the emotional blocks that is keeping me from being a parent. And we're going to connect and emerge as a unit. And it's all going to be great, right? So I ended up actually slipping into my own journey. I was really surprised. I closed my eyes, lay on the couch for hours, and I heard my own voice, like an older and deeper version of my own voice. And it told me that the essence of life is this mother's energy, this like maternal love that gives birth to everything in the universe. And it also said that this energy can't be forced or controlled or will-powered. You just got to let it do its thing. Just make space for it. And when you do that, some people are going to come and go, because some people will be called by it and some people will run away from it. And I just have to let that happen. So I woke up from that trip with this like amazing sense of peace and confidence and like inner wisdom. And I interpreted that feeling as, okay, it's going to work this time. I'm going to get pregnant. Yeah, I did it. But a couple days before the embryo transfer, the embryo's already about to put it in me, and I was listening to Danny talk to a friend who was also having marital issues. And I heard him give his friend advice to really listen to his wife and really show up for her. And I just remember that moment of hypocrisy just made all the resentment rush to my face in this white hot rage. And then I felt quiet. I felt silent. And that's when I knew the marriage was over. So we got divorced, which was terrifying because I was 34, single, during the pandemic, and wanted to start a family again. So I was just like, what am I going to do? What did I do this for? I can't believe that mother energy led me to like get on Hinge. I don't know. Like, it was just horrible. I was terrified. And luckily, that summer, things were opening up, summer of 2021. My friend Alex comes to visit and just spend the summer with me while I'm going through this divorce. And I remember that we went to see another friend who had just given birth, and I watched him hold this newborn baby in his hands so gently. And I remember thinking, my God, like, he's just such a natural caregiver. He makes everyone around him feel cared for, like I always felt with him. And then in the cab home, he started saying, you know, I'm scared that we're in this next phase of life, we're going to have our own families, and we live so far apart that I think we're just going to drift apart from each other. And he started crying. And I reached out and put my hand on his face instinctively in this way that I'd never had before. And that was the moment that I think shifted us out of the friend zone, because shortly after that, he made the first move. And yes, you made the first move. It's my story. You made the first move. And he made the first move, and we got together. And I was honestly, I don't think I've told him this before, but I was so scared to bring my brokenness to him and make him experience the infertility that I went through. So I was so scared to do that to my friend that I love so much. So I said, this is going to take a long time. Let's just start trying, because we wanted to have a baby. And the first month we tried, I was late. And I remember I was alone. I got my pregnancy test, these tests that were just the bane of my existence. It was always such disappointment whenever I saw it. But I was waiting for the result. And I remember thinking, these are the last moments I have before I find out that I'm going to become a mother. And I knew that as soon as that thought entered my head, I knew the answer. And watching the test turn positive, I just started crying and laughing at the same time, because I was so relieved that horrible, demoralizing journey was over, and I was getting to start a whole new, beautiful one. And now, whenever Alex and I have to wrestle with our toddler to brush his teeth or to eat a protein, I have to remind myself that I didn't become a mother out of willpower. I became a mother from trusting my gut and just making space for the life that was already trying to find me. Thank you.
Oh, I love it when a story has a happy ending like that. I know not everyone is as lucky as Kibby on their fertility journey, but sometimes it's nice just to hear things worked out. Anyway, to learn more about Kibby, visit our website, storyclatter.org. If you want more story clutter in your life, head over to our website or follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. If you'd like to come to a show, start your own story clutter show in your community, or even learn how to tell your own science story, you can find all the details on storyclatter.org. If you like this podcast, tell a friend, share an episode, introduce someone new to Story Clutter, and help bring more people into the world of science storytelling. This podcast is produced by me, Misha Gajewski, along with Jen Chen, Nikisha Roberts-Washington, and Aaron Barker. The stories in today's episode were produced by Paula Croxton and Diana Lee. A special thanks goes out to the Story Clutters board and team for their continued support. Our theme music is by Ghost, and next week, I'll be back with stories about bread. Yes, bread. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Until next time, thanks so much for listening. As I get ready to become a parent, I realized there's an overwhelming amount of advice out there. Every app, article, and random stranger seems to have a completely different opinion on what you're supposed to do, which is why I've really been enjoying All the Hacks lately. It's hosted by Chris Hutchins, and the show is all about smarter ways to improve your life, whether that's money, travel, productivity, or in this case, parenting. One episode I especially loved is Debunking the Biggest Parenting Myths with Emily Oster. If you know Emily's work, you know she's amazing at cutting through the fear and guilt with actual data and research. In the episode, they tackle some of the biggest parenting debates and misconceptions, and honestly, it made me feel a lot calmer about navigating all the noise that comes with prepping for a baby. Even beyond parenting, All the Hacks is packed with practical ideas and fascinating conversations that genuinely make life feel a little easier. So, search for All the Hacks. That's All the Hacks in your podcast app, hit follow, and start upgrading your life today.